Welcome everyone to our final installment of our first ever Pasadena City College Theater Arts Speakers Series. I am the host, Professor Catherine Nye. I'm so thrilled that we were able to have this series, and thank you to all of you who have been joining us, and I hope that we will have more of these events in the future. And in fact, I'll throw in that if you've been enjoying these talks, please let people, the powers that be, know that these events are important to you so we can help make more of them happen. Today, I'm so thrilled and honored to be joined by Larry Bogad. Larry came into my world when I was doing my PhD at Arizona State University, and I distinctly remember sitting there thinking, who is this magical creature? And how can I have a life more like his? And I sincerely mean that. I admire the work that you do, and it just really speaks to the things that I'm passionate about. And it's always so helpful to see other people out there doing it. So that's why I wanted to share you and your brilliance and your work with our students at Pasadena City College so that they too can know that it is doable and it is happening out there. Larry, it's been quite a year. It's been quite a millennia, but part of the reason I was really excited to speak to you is because your work does so directly respond to and interact with the world that's happening around us. But I want to back up for a moment and just ask you, what called you into the world of theater? How did Larry Bogad, as we know him today, happen?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you so much, Kathy, for inviting me. I'm so honored to be in this list, because the other people, I was like, uh-oh, I don't know if I can live up to these other three. Oh boy. So I really appreciate you bringing me in. And Mutual, I'm also a fan of your work and everything you've done in this really difficult time in your praxis. So thank you for including me in the conversation. I really appreciate it. And I, as far as getting started in theater, I was in high school and I was 16 and I was a disaffected youth who was having some issues, as many have. And there was this one thing about theater, I was like looking at it. I like to see plays sometimes. And I was like, wow, it's kind of like a team sport without the machismo. You know, I like that because I don't want to get involved in this other stuff necessarily, but I like that this is I'm watching people under pressure work together and have different skills, and then they make something beautiful together, and it's risky, and I love that idea. So that was the part that wasn't directly about, let's say, social justice, was just like, wow, the experience of that from the outside looks like this amazing attempt at collaboration, and it's exciting and risky, and I love that. And that's what drew me in the first place to audition junior year and make mistakes. When they told me to go downstage for the audition, I didn't know what, like, get off the stage. What do you mean? So, you know, you're already getting me off the stage. I didn't even say anything yet. So like, that was my awkward first audition, but that's what got me started, was this idea. And that's what's one of the things that's continued to sustain me, is the idea of collaboration and people bringing whatever they have to the table and making a crew out of that skill set and doing something collectively.
I love that, because, you know, that's such a unique gift theater can offer the world right now as we increasingly move into an ever more individualistic society. It's really hard to make theater by yourself, although it can be done. So you are, you know, unabashedly political in your work. In fact, I was thinking, I wonder if Larry's ever just been in a production of like Our Town. And I too, you know, always sort of wrestled two desires. One was to go into politics or social activism, and one was my jazz hands. So I'm just curious, like, when and how you figured out these two things could be combined.
Yeah.
And why you think theater and performance is a vehicle for social activism. and change?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I did from the age of about, I'm going to say 16 to 27, I regularly acted in plays in one way or another. And that was starting to overlap. Like my first year of grad school was like 26 to 27, something like that. And then I kind of made a shift where I was trying to do, and I miss it, to be honest. I would love to, I don't know about our town, but like I miss just being in a show. Anyone out there who's having a casting call, let me know.
Yeah.
Like I'll have to get a headshot together. It's a mess. But I do. I miss the regular theater, and I still think it's beautiful. And I, as you know, what I've been doing is more often, if I'm in a theater, I'm doing some kind of strange one person piece about COINTELPRO and the FBI or something. So it's like, I share your love of it. I don't. It's nothing negative. Towards theater. I love it. And then your question was, what was the rest of the, I'm sorry, now I got confused.
How did your passion for performing and your passion for activism gel?
It really was like in high school, I was starting to get, I was interested in politics, but wasn't really in the high school context going to demonstrations or anything. And it was in college where that started. And I was lucky enough to go to college, and then there was trouble to get into, basically good trouble, as John Lewis calls it, right? And really it was in those, like that freshman year of college and forward, I was like, had my folks that I would do actions with, and had folks that I was doing theater with on campus, right? And it was this, not a negative divide, but for the most part, these were two different groups that weren't mixing so much, or they didn't mix the activities. And I was like, gee, how could we take these theatrical skills? Because I'm going to these demonstrations, and I'm happy to be included in that, but it doesn't seem like really great performance always. In other words, these are rote behaviors that are repeated, and it's not necessarily compelling in terms of stagecraft. So then I was wondering how I could mix the stagecraft in the street in some way. That are there some skills that translate across this binary or this boundary that I don't know has to exist. And so that's how that kind of started, was like, how do you make, and then meeting folks who were doing interesting street theater. And I'll never forget a guy in Philly, for example, who was a political clown. And he would stand where there was a traffic jam with his infant baby and a little thought bubble sign above his baby's head. And so he's using his baby as a prop, everybody. Yes, that's what was happening. Okay, using his own child as a prop. But the little thought bubble, his baby was thinking, that all the people in the traffic jam could see, what's a bomb for, Daddy? And he's just standing there like with an expression like, how do I explain to my child what a bomb is for? Right? So just this moment of theatrics that is legible instantly, doesn't need a caption. That is the caption. And anyone is stuck in a traffic jam is at least going to see it, and they can think whatever they want to think, but they can't unsee it. And that little moment to me was a thing where I started to think, how else can we dynamically add these aesthetics to a protest action? So that's kind of how those things started to mix for me, and that's what led to tactical performance.
Yes, and I do want to mention Larry has books that you can all purchase or check out at the library. Tactical Performance, The Theory and Practice of Serious Play, which is your newest book, and Electoral Guerrilla Theater, Radical Ridicule, and Social Movements, both of which I highly recommend. And also recommend doing a YouTube video search of your work, including of the clandestine, let's see if I can get this right, Clandestine Clown Rebel Insurgent Army.
It's circa the clandestine. I mean, first of all, say it whatever you want. The name is a joke. So, but it's the Clandestine Insurgent Rebel Clown Army.
Yes.
But it is whatever. Yeah.
Which I remember you showed footage of when you came to ASU, and I was just like, oh, what is that? So Larry, in your own words, what is that?
Well, I do want to, first of all, tip my hat to my co-founders of the Clown Army. And it kind of started, I was in Britain. I couldn't get a job in the States, but I could get a job in Britain, and I moved.
With your open activism and political, I'm shocked.
It's having a little issue, having a little trouble. It's getting a little rough. So I moved to Birmingham, and it was this wonderful artist activist, John Jordan's initial call out for an email. He was like, I want to start an army of clowns. Everybody show up, come to this center at this time, and let's figure out what that is, you know? And so we brought different artists came to this center. This is a long time ago, folks. This is 2003, dear heaven. And the concept, as we mixed all these different aesthetics together, of Boal's theater of the oppressed, of basic clowning, skills of actual clowning, and buffoonery or buffon, and other techniques, we kind of mixed. It was a grab bag, but the idea was to have a crew of trained activists that were trained in nonviolent civil disobedience and clowning and other improv skills that would be able to manifest in the streets and do several things. One, to be surprising and to change the cliched behaviors in the streets, including the cliches of confrontation. Like, we do this and then you do this, and then we do this and you do that, right? Let's break the cliched patterns and see what can happen. I would add to be mediagenic, to attract extra media attention to our cause. By being dynamic and strange and interesting, but also on point, not so strange that you can't tell what we're talking about. That's the fine line. And then also there is this element that friends of mine had as part of their agenda that I learned a lot from, which was, we also want to have a form of protest that is joyful and perhaps therapeutic, in a sense that it breaks the pattern of activist burnout.
Yeah.
So clowning, this kind of political clowning, I will tell you, it's exhausting, because you're in clown on the street with the riot police. It's pretty exhausting, but it's also joyful. Mm-hmm. And it does attract disproportionate media, which annoyed some people, I know. And it does at least make folks hesitate. It raises the cost of repression. It's politically more expensive to club a clown, I believe, right?
So there's optics, right.
So that's a thing. So that's what the Clown Army was. It was several things mixed into one. And we're still writing about it. In fact, it was just now, we're still processing it and developing different ideas. I just got an email from Hillary Ramsden. She's a brilliant clown who was part of the founding group and a brilliant writer. And she wants us to we're going to have another meeting and talk about it. And like, how do we fix it? How do we update it? So the struggle never continues to keep updating and changing ideas.
Yeah, it just reminded me, I was with the Bread and Puppet Theater at the first Women's March in DC, the day after Trump's inauguration. And I don't even know how long and far we walked. It was very exhausting, but being in that joyfulness was really helpful. And also, as we were walking by, I heard so many people say, oh, it's Bread and Puppet. And then that tapped them into, other moments and eras of activism, and just also the way that it can connect us and remind us to the unfortunate continuation of these struggles. Yes, I also think that idea of bringing joy, and then also media, as some of you may know, Arizona's in a time of a ridiculous recount of their ballots that is so theatrical, and I'm sure part of your work is also based on the idea that, the politicians are doing their own performance. I know you believe that, so you may as well counter it. And the latest is that they're searching for traces of bamboo because they believe that these ballots have been flown in from China. And I was thinking, anyone is welcome to steal this idea if you're in Arizona, Tamara. That we should show up dressed like pandas and volunteer to help. Because it's so absurd. It's like, you may as well match it with more absurd.
It's brilliant. Or even just, and the pandas, we're offering like a panda, the pandas can smell the bamboo.
Right, that's exactly.
They can test this paper.
Yeah, they're gonna find the bamboo, don't worry.
Absolutely. These are the experts.
Yeah. Larry, as we're discussing, your work is overtly political. And you also talked about, sort of the price you paid as you were trying to find academic work and stability. I am committed to not make false promises to our students and not sugarcoat, what these various journeys are like. So can you just talk a little bit about the challenges of doing this kind of work, and how you personally have continued to push through that, and just sort of to some of our students who might be thinking about doing this kind of work. It is joyful, but it is also, as we know, challenging.
Yeah, I know, it's such a good question. I appreciate it. It's and to be fair, when we think intersectionally, like some people pay more of a price than others.
Mhm.
So I've got all this other identity privilege in this society that is unjust. So yeah, I've had some difficulties because of this stuff in my career, but not like other folks who don't have those unspoken protections.
Mhm.
So, it's almost like all the more to leverage that and try to give voice, also to try to give voice to other folks. So that's something I've been thinking about is in it. I was the chair of my department this year. Boy, what a year to be chair for the first time. Forest fires, fascism, and pandemic. But I was like, gee, the first time I'm chair, how can I think about who we hire as people to teach or to give lectures, or how do we update the curriculum? How do we address these diversity, equity, and inclusion issues from that position, that this brief position of bureaucratic, this much decision making, and that kind of thing. But I would say also, I think it's great to be, when you're doing work that you think is going to be controversial, to yes, be clear about what buttons it might push, and it's okay. And by the way, you don't have to do it every time, depending on who you are and what's at stake. You make that calculate. Don't let anybody else push you into doing work that you're not ready for. But if you are ready to do work that is going to be a bit radical, right? I think that just be sure you're being rigorous. Just be sure you can defend your claims, because they're going to be tested extra, right? So folks are going to be like, like you want to be able to fact check everything that you're putting into your work the best you can. I'm not saying I've always succeeded, but that's part of what I try, is knowing that you may very well be held to a higher standard than others who aren't taking these positions. And is that fair? Not really, but you can do it. It's okay. The truth is on your side. Stephen Colbert, I'm just going to quote Stephen Colbert when he was in his character. He doesn't do the character anymore,
right?
But he used to do this parodic character. And he, in that persona, he was like, reality has a left-wing bias. And I just thought that summed it up. Like, if you're doing work that in this society is controversial, just be sure that, and don't worry, like you have the facts on your side, but be able to back up your script or your action, right? And then also work with your allies and have frank conversations about what costs there may be to a certain political demonstration or street theater or play or whatever it is, get feedback from friends. And then the other thing I would say is, and I try to, these are things I try to do, and I don't always succeed, but I try to examine my own work these days and say, okay, am I being overly dogmatic, or am I addressing some of the complexity? Like, am I including things that don't directly serve my position only, if that makes sense? Because that's another way to add layers and to vet yourself and check yourself a little bit. So I think those are just some of the answers, because it's true. You can pay a price for the work.
Yes, and I think also you're bringing up an important point of thinking who else you're asking to come along on the ride, and what the variance in the price. If people are going to get arrested, what does that look like for a white person, a non-white person, et cetera, et cetera.
So true.
Yeah, I'm going to use one of your latest projects to segue into another question, which is your dancing mailboxes. I was really thrilled because you had tipped us off through social media that you were starting to do this project. And then the next thing I knew, you were on the national news, maybe even international news. People dressed up as mailboxes, reminding people, encouraging people to vote by mail, and then at the election, celebrating and in costume, so to speak. So how do you get from, that's the end result. You're sitting there, you're thinking about the election, you're watching everything that happens. What is the process from like that light bulb to being in Philadelphia dancing dressed as a mailbox?
Right. And first of all, the costumes are very flattering. I just want to say, if anyone wants to get involved, I love wearing it. It's very flattering. Well, the first spark of the idea was specifically, so by the way, I was in the Northeast at the time. I was visiting family and relatives, and not close, but not super far from where I was, in Pennsylvania, was one of the battlegrounds of voter repression and racist voter repression. I think it's fair to say, and the folks who were engaged in this voter suppression were also engaged in a war of propaganda and cultural war. And they were saying, if you voted by mail, that's suspect. We were thinking of canceling all the votes by mail because they were going against them. And, folks had already voted by mail at that point. You're literally saying you're going to discount people's votes. It was wild. And other folks hadn't voted yet, but they were planning to vote by mail. And it's a pandemic, and that should be an option, and all of that. So there was so much anxiety, Kathy, around it, frankly, on both sides. So I think that helped. I was like, so, the extreme right, who have a very big megaphone or microphone, are anxious because they think these votes are illegitimate. Everyone else is anxious because they're like, oh my goodness, they're going to steal our votes in the name of voter protection, but it's Orwellian. They're going to do the opposite. So there's anxiety everywhere around this. I'm like, what's the symbolism that's not too expensive? You always have to think about that. What's going to be relatively cheap and then can sort of surf on the cultural wave of anxiety and obsession in this moment? And that's why I was like, well, what if it was dancing mailboxes, and specifically something so charming and disarming that violent, aggressive folks that have shown they're violent and aggressive and dehumanized their opponents will think twice about striking out or even screaming out. Because this is, so the choreography's got to be cute, so cute it's like synchronized swimming choreography. I mean, it's ridiculous. And the music is we changed the lyrics to an early 60s song, not even late 60s, an early 60s Mr. Postman song, right? So super harmless, Americana in quotes, like nostalgia, leveraging all the things that are often leveraged for conservatism, but radicalizing and repurposing that symbolism and for street theater. Because then, first of all, to calm things down in the street where there are confrontations, make it a little politically expensive to just be horrible, and also to encourage and uplift. And if people get a little sigh of relief from it, then they may be able to get a little more information. So we're giving out voter information, and we're doing something that's playful and so self-consciously ridiculous. We look so absurd. It's like, we already know, like, yeah, if someone were to make fun of us, they'd be like, oh really, I'm in a mailbox, you're calling me, okay, cool. Right. So to your answer, the answer is finding or drawing on your wonderful allies and collaborators. So I had that idea. Now one person isn't enough, and I don't have the skill set. So I immediately called folks in two different wonderful theater groups in the Northeast, Strike Anywhere Performance Ensemble based in New York, and Farm Arts Collective, who are in Northeast Pennsylvania, and Strike Anywhere's in New York City and also upstate New York. It was like, I got an idea, now what? What do we do? And they're like, okay, so-and-so can write some lyrics. So-and-so is a choreographer. This person can make a costume. I was like, the costume has to be easily made, but looks cool and cheap and blah, blah, blah. And then I got a little grant from the Center for Artistic Activism, just enough to pay people's expenses and the costs of things. And we put it together. So that's my very long-winded answer. I apologize, but it was like, the concept is fine, but then we need some great theater artists who are on board and want to do it. And they did, and it wouldn't have happened without the group, right? And everyone doing their part. The choreography is, I was doing the choreography, and then people were like, and I was like, and my friends were like, listen, I don't know if you should laugh so loudly while we're doing it. I was like, I can't help it. It's so ridiculous. And eventually I stopped laughing loudly while we were doing it. But the song and dance routine, and then practicing what's your media soundbite. So you finally earned some media coverage with this ridiculousness. And we did everywhere we went. The New York Times was instantly all over us, right? Yeah. CNN Chile, my friends in Chile saw it, Australia, France, England, the Netherlands, Britain, but also on the major TV networks. And then someone was making a video with a Taylor Swift song that she gave to the cause. And there's a little clip of us in this. It's not a Taylor Swift video because she didn't make it, but she let them use her song for their video. And then we're in so late night comedians are using just a snippet, just the meme, just the symbol of it as something about the voter repression problem or so the idea is you can have the idea, but then who's going to write that funny rhyme for those new lyrics, right? Who's going to actually volunteer and come out in the streets? We ended up having at our peak, I think we started in small towns and then we went to like Scranton because that's symbolically and politically important, Biden's place, but also a place that's kind of purple, right? And kind of blue, kind of purple. And then Philly was the climactic area because by then we had become mascots for the resistance. Right. We were these goofy, ridiculous, lovable mascots. And that was just fun to be safely in the demonstrations, masked, pretty well distanced. People did a good job with that, but to be part of these demonstrations and add that kind of joyfulness, defiant joyfulness. Like, again, there's critique and content to it. It's not just silly, but I think the silliness in this case, not everything has to be funny. And that's not the only way to go. But when you go with comedy, I think it has certain advantages in certain moments. And with such a heavy moment where there's just such hatred and frankly, racism in the air, like, the right in Pennsylvania were like, oh, bad things happen in Philadelphia, like the votes are not legitimate. And It was so racially coded and awful. And we were like, well, good things happen in Philadelphia. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, like the birth of our nation.
Hello.
Philly, yeah. I mean, I was in Philly at Temple for a while, and it's just a very, very it's a fraught place, but also it's like this is where that history literally resides. I'm going to play a clip. This is after the election. And I believe this is in Philadelphia. So you're going to see Gritty. Good old Gritty. So this is the celebration, just so everyone can see what these mailboxes look like that we're talking about. And then these are also historical landmarks in Philadelphia. And there's Gritty. Yes.
And by the way, I just want to give full credit. These particular mailboxes, turned out when we got to Philly, there was another gang of mailboxes. So these specific, I just want to give full credit.
These are counterfeit mailboxes.
So these are our friends, the other mailboxes, and because we had mailboxes where our heads were coming out of the thing, so we could sing and dance and talk to the media. And this is, and they're wonderful. Spiral Q is this amazing political and community-based organizing theater company in Pennsylvania. And they also had mailboxes, which I love. They're so beautiful. And they're like inside dancing around. So I kept saying when we got to Philly, I was like, I want to find these we have to find the other mailboxes. And at one point towards the end, I think it was like the night before the election or something, I'm walking around my mailbox and I found those guys, and then we're just dancing together. And I asked people to take video. I was like, oh, my cousins, we're here. We're all here together.
Well, and the physical, I mean, not only was the concept of mail-in voting so politicized, but they actually started ripping out and destroying mailboxes all around the country. And so literally the physical mailbox had become politicized. I mean, it was so incredible. I think that
if I can, Kathy, just really quick, part of what I was thinking is, well, the mailboxes are being defamed, they're being attacked as stand-ins for postal workers, like beautiful civil service people, of which there are hundreds of thousands doing important and in a pandemic dangerous work. We should be thanking these people every day, which some people did. They're being defamed for the worst anti-democratic political opportunism, right? And I was like, well, as a stand-in for all those workers that are being defamed, the mailboxes, plus the mailboxes being ripped up. So I was like, well, it's almost like Macbeth, where the woods, Dunsinane wood, like starts to, the trees are moving. I was like, what if these mailboxes came to life to defend themselves and advocate for themselves? What would they say? And so I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to say part of it was like, this is outrageous behavior. We're going to stand up for ourselves now.
I love it. Yeah. And I mean, I think also what you're offering with this is because I think especially last year, people felt, and leading up to last year, people felt so overwhelmed, helpless. And I was volunteering, making calls and helping people figure out where to vote and how to vote, and trying to recruit my friends to do the same. And one of my friends was like, I'm just so frustrated that my friends aren't doing anything. And I said, sometimes you just literally have to offer them a thing to do. It's not that they don't want to help, they just don't know how to help. So I think this is a great, do you want to come dress up like a mailbox and go have some fun? Is such an incredible gift, especially when people, as you were saying, it was such a tense, fraught, exhausting time. We had the pandemic on top of everything else. What what a fun idea. Let's go have some fun. Families.
I really, and what's so interesting, that's, first of all, that's a super good point. Give folks an opportunity to do something, and several options, like a menu of options. And I think that's important. I think it's important even in just political theater in general, is like, not just to tell us how bad things are, but
Right.
give me also an example of successful defiance or resistance or victories. And then how do I plug into that? So that doesn't have to literally be in the dialogue of a play word for word. That might sometimes be a bit heavy-handed, but something in the context, information in the lobby, whatever it is. If you care about this issue, here's ways to plug in, right? Because and then along those lines, when you put that call out, Kathy, like, you find out all these skill sets that people have. Like, we had one of our mailboxes could play the accordion. So of course he was an accordion playing mailbox. He was amazing. And then we had two people on stilts. They were our airmail contingent because they were walking around on stilts with the mailbox. So we had a whole circus going on. If you put the call out and folks bring what they have to the table in ways that you couldn't predict.
Right. Yeah. And I think people do want to help, right? I think we're wired to want to participate. It's just the systems do their work so that we think there's nothing we can do, right? And that's very intentional.
I think that's a great point. And I think defeatism is a passive ally of repression.
Totally. And this is a perfect segue into another thing I wanted to talk to you about, because you mentioned demonstrating success, and we're not often taught that history. I have been thinking about, as I'm sure you have so much, South America, and the parallels between their historical past, their current present, and ours. Generally in the United States, students don't learn very much about South America's history, about the coups, about the US government's participation in those coups. I know you have worked in South America. I have. Can you just talk a little bit about the importance of having these global conversations, not only about failures and tragedies, but also about triumph and success, and how to look towards other models to learn? Because I feel that we're so young as a nation, and we had the civil rights movement, but we're not really taught the civil rights movement from a tactical perspective, right? I think we just don't really know what we're doing. We don't know how to do it. So how do you personally put these things into conversation? Like as an educator, for example.
I think it's such a great question, because I would say that a lot of the powerful institutions do have an institutional memory. Mm-hmm. So governments often have well-paid folks, or at least decently paid folks with good benefits, who keep track of strategies and tactics, right? And think about what to do. And that doesn't mean they always win, but like corporations pay people quite well to remember strategies that work and don't work for them. Mm-hmm. So social movements need the same, but we don't have such a payroll. So that's an issue, right? So how do you have an institutional memory for social movements that's live and nimble and can adapt to new situations by saying, well, here's what worked 30 years ago. That doesn't mean we do that. But how has the situation changed, and what can we learn from last generation to adapt to this model of what's happening now? So I like to, in some of my classes, teach about the civil rights movement, as you mentioned, like what were some of their strategies? You don't just cut and paste, because we have a different media environment now, we have another political environment now, et cetera. But that doesn't mean you can't learn anything from the ancestors. My goodness, of course, you have to. You have to. So what is there? So I think I try to teach some of that history and how folks, in great danger and with great bravery and innovation, the civil rights movement went after apartheid in this country, and even like the American Indian movement or the indigenous rights movement, and the actions that they have taken over the last generation and two for their causes, and what do they do, and how can we be in support of that and understand what's happening. And so I think that's super important. And then yes, the role of the United States as an empire in South America, in Central America, I think is super important to talk about. I have a new book coming out called Performing Truth: Works of Radical Memory for Times of Social Amnesia.
Ooh.
And it's a collection of performance scripts with commentary. And that'll be coming out in like October if all goes well. And in that, one of the through lines is, how do you make history and non-fictional informational sort of texts compelling for performance? Because I think we have to do that, because the history is being rewritten in a bad way. And so one of the pieces is about the United States sponsored coup in Chile in 1973, since you mentioned that, right? But I have an amazing MFA grad student from Chile right now at Davis, Veronica Diaz Muniz, who has a one-person show she just worked on about her experience being here with all the rebellion happening right now in Chile, and she can't be part of it personally, but she's connecting the rebellion, the progressive rebellion right now in Chile, with the history of Chile and 1973 and that coup. And it's a pretty inspiring, important piece that she's doing. So I just want to give her a shout out, because she'll be continuing with that piece. And I think honoring that history and learning from it is really important.
Yeah, so I mean, we are not alone. I think sometimes we think our experience is so unique, and sadly, it's really not. And we can
and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like, you don't have to make the same mistake. Like, I often will say, I'm not wise at all. Please just learn from my mistakes. You don't have. I made every mistake. Just don't. Just I'll tell you what went wrong.
Right.
And then y'all will think of better ideas.
Totally. Before she has to go, and I don't mean to put her on the spot, but just so everyone knows, my students, my mentor, Dr. Tamara Underreiner, is here with us, and because she's so brilliant and such a good composer of questions, before we open it up to everyone, I wanted to give her a chance to ask a question or share a thought, which she might not want to do, and you can say no, Tamara, but I have to share your face with my students, because this is the human that has made me as a teacher and person. You're on mute. This is the comedy of Zoom.
Yeah, thank you. I was just writing a note in the chat to say that I have to leave for another meeting. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to say thank you to both of you, and how beautiful it is to see the student become the teacher, because I've learned so much from the way you curated the arc of this interchange today, Kathy. Thank you. And Larry, it's wonderful to see you again. I remember our conversation outside in the plaza on a beautiful day, not unlike today in Arizona, where we were so obsessed at that time with the border crisis as it was being construed, and the immigrants raids on the immigrants that Arpaio was conducting at that time. And I was asking you about the relationship between the action, the humor involved, and the subsequent change. And you articulated then that the theory of change that has since you articulated again, that has been inspiring to me. And I hope that I continue to learn from the way that people cannot make a change in their minds if they're caught up in their anger and their emotion and in those negative emotions. And your clown work has just been so such a brilliant manifestation, and it's just thrilling to see it continue to happen in the mailbox dances and so forth. So what a treat to be back here. And thanks, Kathy, for giving me a chance to not have to put it in a chat hastily, although I was fumble fingered on the way out here. So I do have to take leave to do something far less interesting, but I'm glad this is being recorded. And I get to share this with my family later on today. They are all doing separate things now. So
thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Hugs
so
and
much.
kisses.
It's so great to see you.
All right, you take care.
Thank you. And I'm only passing on the torch of the experiences I got to have at ASU of being exposed to scholars and performers from outside our community. And we are a small but mighty theater department at PCC, but you all deserve to hear beyond what we can say. So that's I'm just trying to continue and spread the gift, pass it forward, as they say.
You are mighty with you there. Keep up the good work. Keep up the good work.
I will send her a check for the compliments later, everyone. Don't worry about it. So before I turn it over to everyone else for questions, and I know we've got some great students in the room with us, I do just want to ask you, most of our students at PCC are in that tender and beautiful age of 18 to 22. We do have older students as well, but if you met the younger you, Larry, and you're not that much older than 18 to 22.
Oh yeah.
What?
I'm ready to admit 25. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. Let's not go beyond that. What would you want to say to yourself? What do you wish you knew about what was coming and how to be gentle with yourself?
Ooh, that's so good. One really good question. I think one thing would be to say that, there's this idea of permaculture, right? And people talk about how do you have a culture that is sustainable, that the world is sustainable. And I would say that permaculture is, the idea of permaculture also applies to the body of the artist activist. Mm-hmm. That permaculture applies for yourself as well. So do things at a sustainable rate and have a support system and be with your friends and family and appreciate and nurture those aspects of your life as well. And stay active, because that's also nourishing. You can get a lot from being part of these cultural movements. I think it's wonderful. But take care of yourself as well. Right. So that would be one thing. That would almost be the main thing I would say, And then the other thing I would say is think about how your work can fit in with a little bit of a life plan so that, you can be okay. Do you know what I mean? Because precarity is with us and it's very real.
And I so appreciate you saying that, Larry, because I think we really romanticize suffering and lack. And I'm over it. Bills are real, and we have to be able to say that without feeling guilty. And that doesn't mean that you're like purchasing a Porsche, but, saying I need to be able to have a roof over my head, and also so that you can go out and do the work. And it's okay to say, I need, this is sort of my bottom in order for me to be able to do that work. Some people are like, I'm fine living with 10 other people and sleeping on a sofa and eating ramen every day. I have to have salmon.
And by the way, that's allowed to change over time. So you can feel that way now, and it's okay if you get older and you're like, my back hurts. I need a bed that's better, or whatever it is. Like, yes. That's natural and it's okay. And again, yes, you're right. We're not talking about, and I need a Mercedes. It's just like, hey, it's okay to be aware of those things. And even like, I've had friends who are living very marginally, this is an example, and then they're asked to work to provide their art for free, and they're already having a hard time. Yeah. And the only thing, the fair question to ask is if it's a group that doesn't have resources, that's appropriate. And if it's like a group that has resources, it's like, Well, you're not asking anybody else to work for free. Why are you asking the artist to work for free? And by the way, your landlord won't say, oh, you did that thing for free. You don't have to pay rent this month.
Yeah.
It's cool. Like that's not happening generally. So it is okay to, again, proportionate to who we're talking about that you're doing a thing for. You know, you get my point. Like it's okay to say that your labor has value, because I think the culture should agree with that. Especially when you're having a hard time and trying to make ends meet, you know. So I think it's all relevant, you know. And then creatively, I would say, try to mix aesthetically what you honestly have fun with the politics that you want to pursue in your work. If you're a political artist, you know what I mean? Like you want to have fun with this. So, and that doesn't necessarily mean humor. I not always, I tend to gravitate towards some kind of silliness, but your thing might be like, actually, I really love reverent, sacred work that approaches the sacred and is very compelling because it makes people weep. Like, that's amazing. If that's your jam, pursue that which sustains you and the aesthetic that you love while doing the work. Because I think, you know, you'll, you know, listen to yourself and find your own voice that way.
Yeah, and we'll have to make a separate phone date because I have used humor to cope with trauma for as long as I can remember. And I've really stepped on some toes lately. And it's like, how do I explain that humor is not a dismissal of the pain? It's the way I deal with the pain, and just like, you know, how to balance apologizing if you've offended someone without, you know, I can't change who I am fundamentally, and humor is who I am fundamentally. Like someone said to me once, if Kathy could laugh at her own funeral, she would, and it's true. So phone date pending, Larry.
Sure. And by the way, I saw an amazing performance before the pandemic of an amazing Native American theater group called the 1491s, right? As in before Columbus showed up. And it's amazing, and it's edgy humor, and it's like humor about the most horrifying things, like colonization, right? And at one point, and they're very meta, and they're very, you know, stopping and talking to the audience and getting the audience involved, but they're talking about horrific history with the most raw humor. And this doesn't apply to my work, obviously, for identity reasons of my background. I'm talking about this group, not myself. But they literally, one of the performers stopped and said, and by the way, it's part of our tradition to deal with trauma with humor. So it's okay, y'all. Like, it's going to be okay. Like, literally, knowing the audience is going to be like, is this okay? And they're like, we're doing it. It's for us. You're here. Cool. Right. And it was just such an interesting moment of them both doing the humor that is so raw and edgy, and then bringing the audience in by saying, we know what we're doing, you know, like it's our control, it's our autonomy, it's our choice to do this.
And it is very cultural. I mean, my family comes from the former Yugoslavia, and anytime I'm around, you know, Polish people, that part of the world, I just instantly connect with that humor because I get it. You know, it's like no one is saying these things were actually funny. It's just how we cope. Yeah, and I would say to the students in the room here that an education in genre is incredibly important. I have seen people go off on satire without realizing what it was they were witnessing, you know, and not to say you can critique satire, but if you come in, you know, wanting to drop nuclear bombs on someone's performance because you thought it was offensive and you don't understand that was like part of the point, right? You talked about Steve Colbert earlier. It's like, that's satire, right? That's satire you're watching, and you need to know that. So having a solid education in genre and the history of those genres, knowing, for example, that there was performance being done in concentration camps and, you know, what that looked like and why, is very important. I guess I'm giving a plug for theater history here.
Yes.
Larry, I want to open up the room to our guests, and you can drop questions into the chat if you want to. You can unmute yourself and ask away, whatever. And there's no such thing as a dumb question, so don't be shy. You can also just say, hi, I think you're rad, Larry. That's always good to hear. Who are some of your influences in theater, Larry?
Great. What a great question. Most recently, this, even though I don't share their historical experience, the 1491s is like, wow. Similarly, Culture Clash. If you check, some of you know,
Not
like
the band, everyone.
yeah. Again, not saying, oh yes, I'm coming from a different place, but I'm amazed by them is the point.
Yeah.
And then coming from in a more European radical history, I would say Dario Fo of Italy is a big influence. I got to perform in one of his plays many years ago in Philadelphia, Accidental Death of an Anarchist, which is about police brutality and stuff. It's pretty great.
Yes, we did They Don't Pay, We Won't Pay last year.
Oh, you do? Oh, I teach that play about once a year at Davis. Not almost every year. I teach it in one of my classes. So that's so great that you did that. That's amazing. So yeah, Dario Fo, Augusto Boal, and everyone who's come since in that Boalian theater of the oppressed tradition, Anna Devere Smith is somebody that I teach a lot. And show her work. Amazing. So those are just some just to get started, I guess. There's more, but then I'm going to start to get boring. But those are just some.
Well, this is an awkward question, Larry. Do you admire yourself?
Not really, but I'm okay with it. With it. I'll tell you that. No, but I'm one of the things about that permaculture thing is to say to yourself, hey, I'm doing the work, I'm doing the best I can, I'm learning from the ancestors, I'm learning from my peers, and then you just do your work at a sustainable pace if you can, and learn from mistakes.
Yeah. And I asked that question because I do think it's important to give credit to yourself, and especially if you're a woman, especially if you're not white, it's the world is kind of always telling you that you're not good enough. And so knowing how to take stock sometime and say, good job, even if it's just like you showed up at a time where it would be very easy to not be able to do that. Vanessa writes, I feel as if in some ways we're approaching news media fatigue for sure. How do you plan to address that and continue the work that you do, which she thinks is awesome?
Oh, thank you so much. And great question. And yeah, there's burnout, right? Like, I don't want to hear about this anymore. This is ridiculous. But I think that's why you try to reach other parts of the brain. I don't actually know which part. I'm not a brain doctor, but I'm saying, like, if this is receiving things directly, every podcast, every online social media news source, and you're like done. So then what's nice about performing in theater, tactical performance, as I call it, or street theater or media pranks, is you're doing things that are succinct, not too easily processed, but they're surprising in some way. And that doesn't always mean humor. It can be surprising, like, whoa, this was really sad, but came at me from an angle I'm not used to. And that can open up someone's nervous system, and then I have fatigue from hearing about what they said on Fox News or MSNBC. I have fatigue of that, but I don't have fatigue towards these dancing whatevers, like strange things that are happening, because I haven't seen that before. So I don't have fatigue in this part of my brain. So you try to get them from a different angle. I have a piece called Economusic, and it's not particularly good. It's just weird. And I make music out of economic data. So you can see the chart. Here's the unemployment rate, and there's notes on it. Does that make sense? And then I'm playing that on my flute terribly. And then I get the audience to sing the incarceration rate of the United States, I tune them up, and the incarceration rate goes high, y'all. It's not cool. Like from 1970 until now, it gets to an ear-splitting pitch right now. So when we get to over 2 million people in jail in this country, it goes, over time, like 1970, 1980. You see what I'm saying? And it's horrible right now. It's an unsustainable musical pitch because it's an unsustainable social reality. And it's super. So everyone goes, we heard our own ears, and they laugh. Yes, because
Note that.
that's data synesthesia I'm trying to achieve. In other words, I want you to get the data. If I read stats, are you going to even, no, you'll leave. Like you're gonna,
Right.
but if we do this participatory, weird, surprising method, all I'm trying to do is surprise people and get at a different part of the brain than besides the tired parts, I guess. So
Yeah.
your question is something I'm totally struggling with. Thank you.
Well, you see, this is why I invited him, because that I have seen that performance, and I think it's such a brilliant, you're right. If you say to people, hey, you want to come in a room with me for an hour and we're going to read statistics,
Be like, why am I reading statistics to myself? Nobody showed up.
Exactly. But you're like, come to this performance. And I think it's like the broccoli and the cookies concept, where it's like, most people lean towards pleasure. We're wired towards pleasure, not everyone, but like if something doesn't feel sweet about it, it's a hard sell. And there's also practical things. I mean, I've been lucky to work with Cornerstone and different groups who are like, is there food in the room? Is there childcare? Are there things that will help someone feel, especially at the end of a long day, they've been at work all day long, and you're like, come to this meeting at 8:00 at night, right? Like you got to have something that's going to make it fun and pleasurable and sustaining. And so, yeah, I've had students sometimes say to me, like, I can't get people to come to these events that I'm organizing. And one of my first questions is like, do you have food? Are you playing games, or are you telling them that they're horrible people because they don't align with you? And I think your work speaks to that in such a lovely way.
Thank you so much. And I think those are such great rules, like taking care of the body, taking the emotional temperature of the room, all of those things. I'm so glad you mentioned those, and that's and Cornerstone's amazing. So that's really great. That's
yeah.
really
And these are just, it's like it's through your communities. And the thing I would say to my 18 to 22-year-old self is that don't stop learning. We have institutionalized the concept of education so much in this country that we think, I got the degree, I am done learning, now I go work, right? And it's like, I'm taking a playwriting class right now. I love being a student again. I love having these conversations, and academics so rarely, except for conferences, which are their own like performance of stuff that I won't even get into, like having conversations, learning from each other, saying like what's working for you, what's not working for you, especially in the classroom, is so rare. And I just wish that someone encouraged me and reminded me that it's okay to always simultaneously be a student and a growing expert in your field. So yeah, all the things I know are just because I'm constantly just like, what do you know? What can I absorb? What can I observe? And for those of you in the LA area, we're talking about Cornerstone. They have institutes. You can also learn from them. And hopefully someday, Larry, when COVID is chilled out, we have funding, I would love to bring you down to PCC to do a workshop of your own.
So such a pleasure.
Stay tuned, PCC students. If you have a minute, I want to give one last chance for a question. And Mira, I'm going to call you out because I know you always have great questions.
Let's see if I can come up with something. I really liked just the whole mailboxes with them being dug up and stuff really struck me. And you kind of answered this question, but it's like, it's so hard to come up with novel ways to comment on societal issues. And I guess I'm wondering, I don't know, why do you think that humanity copes with trauma with humor?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah. I don't understand why that's such a universal thing, but it totally is. And yeah. I also wanted to respond to Dr. Nye's comment about how being poor and having been traumatized is so romanticized nowadays, especially with the media that we have. So like, I don't know, I think critiquing that might be an interesting idea too. I don't know.
Mira, you may have just pitched your own future master's thesis, by the way. So hang on to these questions, girl.
At least it's recorded.
That's right. We have record. Oh my gosh. It's so interesting. I have always thought it is. I would like to know of a culture that doesn't use humor to deal with trauma, because it does seem. I was in Egypt during the beginning of the beginning period of the revolution years ago, and there's a lot of very tough things going on there now and then. And someone just kind of said to me, made kind of a joke, an edgy joke, and was like, "We use humor here, Egyptians. It's a thing that we're known for. We use humor to deal with, trauma and bad things." And I was like, wow, like so many groups say that knowingly about themselves. And it's true, right? So I think it's a sense of, you need relief. Like your heart will burst sometimes if you don't give it. We know, doctors now know, when you laugh, you're oxygenating. There's actually good, healthy things happening in your body and your body chemistry even. So there's reasons why, that's why we value those friends who make us actually belly laugh. It's just so all too precious. Like hang out. Oh, that would be my advice to my younger self. Those people that make you laugh so hard it kind of hurts, at least once a week, or hang out with them more and be one of those people. It's one of the greatest gifts you can give. And so no, I think that's why is like, we're in a rough time now. And we, all the more so do we need humor and a kind of humor that doesn't let the system off the hook.
Right.
Like I imagine there's humor that's just like, oh, I feel better. Now I'm not going to do anything. Well, but there's the humor that doesn't change the subject, that doesn't dodge, that keeps the pressure on the problem people, the folks that are hurting others. Humor that punches up rather than humor that punches down is one of those things I've learned. So when we're crafting it, it can make us laugh and also give us feelings of solidarity and empathy, not the opposite.
I definitely agree.
Larry, you're a mensch, to use a Yiddish term. I love you, and I'm so thrilled that that you've been able to join us. And students know that this is not the end of the conversation. So if you have more questions for Larry, I'm sure he would be willing at his own leisure to answer those through email. I can get you in touch. If you want to talk to me more about political performance, this is the time in your life to start figuring out the kind of work that you want to do. And it's performance in theater is not one thing. It's not all Disney on Broadway. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And by the way, you can love that and also want to be a rebel clown. Like
right.
There's
not mutually exclusive.
Not mutually exclusive, and no one can tell you how to do it except for you. Like there's no right way to do it. So if this is tinging something in you, know that I am there for you, and I will happily also put you in touch with people who are also doing the work. Thank you, Larry.
What a pleasure. What an honor. Thank you so much, Kathy. So great to talk to you and everybody. I really appreciate your questions. This was a pleasure.
Thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you hopefully in the future with our next speaker series.
Fantastic.
Take care, everyone. Bye.